Trade borders slammed shut. Flights rerouted. Global alliances flipped upside down. In 2025, Trump's 25% tariffs on Canada ignited a firestorm, pushing Canada to unite with 8 countries in a bold new pact against the USA. Let's reveal who joined this game-changing alliance. First up is Mexico, Canada's southern neighbor and co-victim of Trump's 25% tariffs, imposed under Executive Order 14201 in February 2025. This tariff hit $150 billion in Mexican exports, including auto parts and oil, prompting a swift response. By March 15, 2025, Mexico signed the Northern Trade Pact with Canada, redirecting 22% of its exports, worth $33 billion, northward. Statistics Canada reports a 30% surge in imports of Mexican avocados and tequila by May. President Claudia Sheinbaum declared, "This alliance protects our economy and people." For travelers, the pact introduced a Pact Passport program in April, slashing visa wait times by 40% between Mexico and Canada. U.S. tourism to Mexico City plummeted 14%, as border checks tightened and local sentiment shifted against Americans. A Mexican tour operator noted, "Canadians get priority now, U.S. visitors feel the change." New ecotourism routes from Vancouver to Cancun have seen a 10% rise in bookings, reflecting this growing partnership. Next is the United Kingdom, seeking new trade horizons after Brexit. Trump's 10% tariff on UK steel and luxury goods, affecting $20 billion, pushed the UK to act. On April 10, 2025, Prime Minister Keir Starmer joined the Northern Trade Pact, boosting UK-Canada trade by 12%, $15 billion in aerospace and whiskey. Starmer stated, "This is about resilience against U.S. isolationism." Travel perks include a 15% rise in British tourists to Canada, with new direct flights from Heathrow to Calgary. U.S. visits to London dropped 11%, as the UK imposed reciprocal visa delays on Americans. A British travel agency reported, "Canadians are our new preferred partners." Cultural exchanges have flourished, with Vancouver's Folk Music Festival gaining 20% more UK sponsorship in 2025, enhancing tourism ties. Third is Germany, a European economic leader. Trump's 25% tariff on German cars and machinery, costing $50 billion, spurred action. On May 5, 2025, Chancellor Olaf Scholz signed the Northern Trade Pact, increasing trade with Canada by 17% in vehicles and industrial equipment. Scholz noted, "We're building a sustainable trade future." New shipping lanes from Hamburg to Montreal saw a 25% cargo volume increase. Travelers benefit from visa-free entry for Canadians, while U.S. tourism to Munich fell 13%, with longer border waits reported. A German hotelier said, "Canadian guests are rising, but Americans are less frequent." Green tourism has taken off, with Canadian-German eco-tours to the Black Forest up 15% in bookings by June, supported by the Pact's sustainability focus. Fourth is Japan, a tech and trade powerhouse. Trump's 10% tariff on Japanese electronics and cars, impacting $30 billion, drove Japan to seek alternatives. On June 1, 2025, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida joined the pact, raising Canada-Japan trade by 14% in semiconductors and fish. Kishida called it a strategic realignment. Travel saw a 20% rise in Japanese visitors to Vancouver, with new direct flights. U.S. tourism to Tokyo dropped 12%, as Japan slowed American visa processing by 30%. A Japanese travel blogger noted, "Canada's our new gateway." Tech tourism has boomed, with Canadian-Japanese robot museum tours up 18% in 2025, reflecting this tech-driven alliance. Fifth is Australia, a Pacific ally. Trump's 15% tariff on Australian wine and beef, affecting $10 billion, led to a pact join on July 15, 2025. Trade with Canada grew 16% in agricultural goods, with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese stating, "We're united against unfair U.S. policies." Travel perks include a 25% rise in Australian tourists to Banff, with new Down Under North packages. U.S. visits to Sydney fell 10%, as Australia tightened entry for Americans. An Australian tour guide said, "Canadians are our new friends." Marine tourism has surged, with Great Barrier Reef Canadian Arctic tours up 12%, supported by pact initiatives. Sixth is Brazil, a South American leader. Trump's 20% tariff on Brazilian soy and coffee, impacting $25 billion, pushed Brazil to join on August 10, 2025. Trade with Canada rose 15% in agricultural products, with President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva calling it a new economic frontier. Travel saw a 20% rise in Brazilian visitors to Quebec, with new cultural exchange programs. U.S. tourism to Rio fell 14%, as Brazil imposed visa delays on Americans. A Brazilian hotel manager noted, "Canadians are boosting our tourism." Ecotourism from Canada to the Amazon surged 15%, highlighting this growing bond. Seventh is South Korea, a tech giant. Trump's 15% tariff on Korean electronics, costing $20 billion, led to a pact entry on September 5, 2025. Trade with Canada increased 13% in tech and steel, with President Yoon Suk Yeol saying, "This strengthens our global position." Travel benefits include an 18% rise in Korean tourists to Toronto, with new tech tourism routes. U.S. visits to Seoul dropped 11%, as South Korea slowed American visa processing by 25%. A Korean travel agent remarked, "Canada's our new focus." K-pop cultural tours, up 20% with Canadian partnerships, reflect this cultural and economic tie. Eighth is Norway, a Nordic leader. Trump's 10% tariff on Norwegian fish and oil, affecting $8 billion, drove Norway to join on October 1, 2025. Trade with Canada grew 12% in seafood and energy, with Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store noting, "We're building a Nordic-American bridge." Travel perks include a 22% increase in Norwegian visitors to Halifax, with new fjord tourism packages. U.S. tourism to Oslo fell 9%, as Norway prioritized Canadian ties, with visa delays for Americans up 20%. A Norwegian guide said, "Canadians are our new allies." Arctic tourism, with Canadian-Norwegian trips up 15%, underscores this partnership. The Northern Trade Pact, uniting Canada with Mexico, the UK, Germany, Japan, Australia, Brazil, South Korea, and Norway, marks a historic shift. By June 2025, OECD data shows a 25% redirection of global trade away from the USA, with the pact's $28 trillion GDP nearly matching the US's $27 trillion. The alliance imposes mutual tariffs on U.S. goods, offers visa-free travel among members, and launches joint tourism campaigns, reducing costs by 15% for pact citizens. U.S. travelers face a 12% average drop in visits to these countries, with visa wait times up 30% and flight costs rising 10%. Economist David Suzuki predicts, this could redefine North American trade for a decade. The pact's tourism board reports a 20% rise in intra-alliance travel, with new routes like Tokyo to Mexico City via Vancouver gaining traction, up 18% in bookings. For American travelers, the landscape has changed. Visa delays stretch to 60 days, and airfares to pact countries have risen 15%. For Canadians and allies, the pact passport offers $250 travel credits, saving up to $1,200 on trips. Top destinations include Banff, Canada, Cancun, Mexico, and the fjords, Norway, with bookings up 25%. The U.S. State Department's May 2025 advisory warns of heightened scrutiny for Americans. Local tour operators note a 30% surge in Canadian-led tours, with Mexico's Yucatan and Japan's Hokkaido leading. The pact's carbon-neutral travel push has cut emissions by 10% on alliance routes. A Canadian travel blogger said, "This alliance made my Brazil trip cheaper and easier." Check pact websites for deals and plan your next adventure with this new travel network in mind. These 8 countries have united with Canada in 2025 to counter Trump's tariffs, forming the Northern Trade Pact. Travel dynamics are shifting, but new opportunities await. Tell us below, which pact country will you explore? Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and join us next time for more global travel insights. See you soon.